Arizona Territory, 1883. The desert had a way of swallowing sound. By late afternoon, the red cliffs surrounding Caleb Mercer's ranch glowed beneath the sinking sun, their shadows stretching long across the dry earth. The wind moved through the sagebrush in restless whispers, carrying dust and the faint scent of rain that never seemed to arrive. Caleb stood beside the corral, one weathered hand resting against the wooden fence as he watched the young Mustang circle the enclosure. "Easy," he muttered. The horse pinned its ears back. Caleb understood stubborn creatures. At 48 years old, the former cavalry scout had earned a reputation throughout Red Canyon as a man who spoke little and worked hard. Folks respected him enough to leave him alone, which was exactly how he preferred it. 3 years had passed since fever had swept through the territory and taken his wife, Clara, and their 8-year-old son, Thomas. 3 years since laughter had disappeared from the ranch house. The nursery remained untouched. Thomas's wooden soldiers still sat on the shelf beside the small iron bed. Clara's sewing basket rested near the fireplace, exactly where she'd left it. Caleb had never found the courage to move either. He tightened the saddle strap hanging over the fence and glanced toward the house standing beneath the old juniper tree. The windows reflected nothing but silence. The horse suddenly jerked its head upward. Caleb frowned. Something was wrong. Animals noticed trouble long before people did. He listened. At first there was only wind. Then came the distant sound of hooves. Fast, uneven. His eyes narrowed toward the canyon trail. A rider appeared between the rocks. Horse and rider stumbled down the narrow path in a cloud of dust. Before Caleb could move, the horse collapsed. The woman riding it tumbled into the dirt. Caleb reached for the revolver hanging at his hip out of habit. The woman struggled onto one elbow. Dark hair clung to her face. Her riding skirt was torn near the knee and dried blood stained one sleeve. She couldn't have been older than 25. Her eyes lifted toward him. Not frightened. Determined. "Please," she managed. "Don't send me back." Then she fainted. Caleb stared at her. He'd spent years avoiding other people's troubles. Whatever this was, it wasn't his concern. The desert offered harsh lessons. One of them was simple. Stay out of matters that don't belong to you. He looked down again. The woman's breathing was shallow. Dust coated her face. The horse she'd ridden lay still beneath the canyon ridge. The sun dipped lower. Night approached quickly in Arizona. Caleb cursed softly beneath his breath. Then he holstered the revolver. Damn it. Carefully, he lifted the unconscious stranger into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Elena Reyes woke to the smell of coffee. For one confused moment she thought she was home. Then she opened her eyes. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar. Wooden beams crossed overhead. Sunlight filtered through linen curtains. Panic surged through her. She sat upright too quickly. Pain shot through her shoulder. "You'll tear the stitches." The deep voice startled her. Across the room, a broad-shouldered man stood beside the stove. Gray threaded through his dark hair. His expression revealed little. "You were injured," he said. Elena's hand instinctively moved toward the bandage wrapped around her arm. "You stitched it. You needed it." "Why?" He poured coffee into a tin mug. "You were bleeding." It seemed explanation enough for him. Elena studied the stranger carefully. "Where am I?" "My ranch." "You live here alone?" His silence answered the question. He placed a plate on the table. "Cornbread. Beans. Dried beef. You should eat." Elena hesitated. "You don't even know who I am." Caleb finally looked at her. "No. You aren't going to ask?" He returned his attention to the coffee. "If you want to tell me, you will." Elena blinked. Most men demanded explanations. Most men expected obedience. This one simply handed her breakfast. "My name is Elena." He nodded once. "Caleb Mercer." No further introduction followed. The quiet stretched between them. Oddly enough, Elena found it comforting. Days passed slowly beneath the desert sun. Elena recovered strength faster than Caleb expected. By the fourth morning, he found her standing beside the horse trough. "You shouldn't be lifting anything," he said. She glanced over her shoulder. "I'm carrying water, not cattle." The corner of Caleb's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. Elena noticed things about him. The way he repaired broken tools instead of replacing them. The way he paused outside one particular room without entering. The way loneliness had settled into the ranch house like dust. One afternoon, curiosity finally overcame caution. "What happened to your family?" Caleb's hand stilled against the saddle he was repairing. For a long moment, Elena thought he wouldn't answer. "The fever." One word. Heavy enough to carry years of grief. I'm sorry. He nodded once. The conversation ended there. But something shifted. Trust rarely arrived all at once. It came quietly. In shared silences. In simple acts of kindness. Elena helped mend blankets. Caleb taught her how to calm nervous horses. Neither asked questions the other wasn't ready to answer. Yet both understood pain. One evening, Elena stood beneath the juniper tree outside the house. The desert sky burned gold and crimson overhead. Caleb joined her. You've been looking over your shoulder since you arrived, he said. Elena's posture stiffened. They'll come eventually. Who? She hesitated. My father's business partner. Caleb waited. He arranged a marriage. You ran. Yes. You love someone else? Elena shook her head. No. Then why leave? The answer came softly. Because I wanted the choice to belong to me. Caleb looked toward the distant canyon walls. He understood wanting ownership over your own life. Even if the cost was loneliness. Before he could reply, the ranch dogs began barking. Sure. Urgent. Both turned toward the ridge. Dust rose against the evening sky. Riders. Several of them. Moving steadily toward the ranch. Elena's face drained of color. They found me. Caleb studied the approaching silhouettes. Then he looked at Elena. For the first time since Clara's death, another person's fate had become tied to his own. He exhaled slowly. Get inside. Elena didn't move. You don't understand? No, Caleb interrupted quietly. His gaze remained fixed on the riders drawing closer through Red Canyon. But I reckon I'm about to. The desert wind picked up around them. Somewhere overhead, a hawk cried against the fading light. Beside him, Elena stood her ground. Neither ran. And beneath the shadow of the old juniper tree, two lonely souls waited for whatever the Arizona sunset would bring next. The riders approached at an unhurried pace, their silhouettes dark against the fading red light of the canyon. Dust trailed behind them like smoke. There were 6 men in total. The one leading them sat tall in the saddle. He wore an expensive black coat despite the desert heat, his silver belt buckle catching the last rays of sunlight. Clean-shaven, broad-shouldered, and perhaps no older than 35, he carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. Elena's fingers curled at her sides. That's him, she whispered. Caleb glanced toward her. The man you ran from? She nodded. Victor Salazar. Victor brought his horse to a stop several yards away. His eyes settled on Elena. There you are. No relief softened his voice. Only expectation. Elena took a step closer to Caleb. I told you I wasn't coming back. Victor removed his hat. You disappeared without explanation. I left a letter. You left embarrassment. The desert wind shifted between them. Victor's gaze finally moved to Caleb. You've been sheltering my fiancée. Caleb stood motionless. She's been recovering. Victor's jaw tightened. Then our business here is concluded. Elena's voice sharpened. No. Every man present turned toward her. I said no. Victor dismounted. This arrangement was agreed upon by our families years ago. I never agreed. You have responsibilities. Elena lifted her chin. And I have a life. Silence settled over the ranch. Victor studied her for a long moment before exhaling. You've changed. No, Elena answered quietly. I've stopped pretending. Victor looked toward Caleb. 3 days. Caleb frowned. What? Victor adjusted his gloves. I'll return in 3 days. Elena can make her decision before witnesses. Elena opened her mouth to argue. Victor raised a hand. If she chooses to stay after that? His eyes briefly hardened. I will accept it. Without another word, he mounted his horse. The other riders followed. Within moments, they disappeared into the desert dusk. Only dust remained. Elena released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Caleb stared toward the horizon. You trust him? No. He nodded. Good. The next morning arrived beneath an endless blue sky. Caleb repaired fencing along the southern pasture while Elena worked nearby, gathering loose planks and hammering replacement boards into place. Neither spoke much. By midday, Elena finally broke the silence. You think I'm foolish? Caleb secured another nail. No. You don't know what I left behind. He leaned against the fence. You don't owe me explanations. Elena brushed dirt from her hands. Victor isn't cruel. Caleb waited. He simply believes duty matters more than choice. And what do you believe? Elena looked across the wide desert stretching beyond the ranch. I think people shouldn't spend their lives fulfilling promises made by others. Caleb studied her profile. You've thought about this a while. She laughed softly. My entire life. Later that afternoon they rode into Red Canyon for supplies. Townsfolk noticed immediately. Conversations quieted as Elena followed Caleb through the general store. Mrs. Watkins, the widow who ran the register, offered Caleb a cautious smile. Didn't expect to see you bringing company. Caleb collected coffee beans. Didn't expect company myself. Mrs. Watkins looked toward Elena. Are you staying long? Elena answered before Caleb could. Long enough to decide where I belong. The older woman blinked. Then nodded slowly. Fair enough. Outside the store, Caleb loaded supplies onto the wagon. People talk, Elena said. They always do. Does it bother you? He paused. It used to. What changed? Caleb climbed onto the driver's seat. Eventually you realize most folks aren't living your life. Elena smiled faintly. I think I would have liked Clara. Caleb's expression softened. So would I. That evening, rain clouds gathered beyond the distant mesas. The scent of approaching storms drifted across the desert. Elena stood beneath the juniper tree. Caleb joined her. You loved your wife very much, Elena said. Still do. The answer surprised her. You can love someone who's gone? Caleb stared toward the horizon. Loving someone doesn't stop just because they aren't here anymore. Elena lowered her gaze. Then how do you move forward? He considered the question carefully. You don't move on. What do? You make room. The wind stirred the branches overhead. For grief? Caleb shook his head. For life. That night, rain finally came. It struck the ranch roof in steady rhythms. Inside, Elena sat near the fireplace mending a torn saddle blanket. Caleb carved quietly at the kitchen table. You never told me what you're making, Elena observed. He hesitated, then handed it over. A small wooden horse rested in her palm. Its details were simple but careful. You made toys? For Thomas. The room fell silent. Elena traced the carved mane gently. He would have loved this. Caleb's voice roughened. I hope so. After a moment, Elena reached into the pocket of her dress. She withdrew a small silver pendant. My mother gave this to me before she died. Caleb studied the engraved wildflower. Why show me? Elena closed her fingers around it. Because I don't think I've trusted anyone with my memories before. The fire crackled between them. Something shifted. Neither named it. Neither needed to. The third sunrise arrived too quickly. Caleb found Elena standing beside the horse corral. You ready? He asked. No. He adjusted the saddle straps. Good. Elena blinked. What? If you were completely certain, Caleb said, this decision wouldn't matter. She studied him carefully. You're afraid. He didn't deny it. Of losing you? Caleb met her gaze. I've already buried everyone I've ever planned a future with. The honesty hung heavily between them. Elena stepped closer. If I stay, you don't owe me anything. I know. Pause. Then softly. But what if I want to stay? Caleb looked away first. Then make sure it's because it's what you want. Not because of gratitude. Not because of loneliness. Not because someone rescued someone else. Choice mattered. Perhaps more than anything. Hoofbeats echoed across the desert. Victor had returned. Elena inhaled deeply. The ranch house stood behind them. The juniper tree swayed overhead. The Arizona sun climbed steadily higher. Beside her, Caleb remained silent. Steady. Present. He would not decide for her. He would only stand beside her while she decided for herself. Elena straightened her shoulders. For the first time in years, fear no longer guided her steps. Whatever happened next, the choice would belong to her. Hoofbeats echoed through the desert. Victor Salazar rode at the front of the small group, his expression unreadable beneath the Arizona sun. The same men who had accompanied him before waited several yards behind, allowing space for whatever decision was about to unfold. Elena stood beside Caleb near the horse corral. The wind tugged gently at the loose strands of her dark hair. Victor dismounted. I've returned as promised, he said. No anger colored his tone. No accusation. Only expectation. Elena squared her shoulders. I know. Victor glanced briefly toward Caleb. Have you made your choice? The desert seemed to hold its breath. Elena looked toward the ranch house. Toward the old juniper tree. toward the open fields where she'd helped mend fences and soothe frightened horses. Then her gaze settled on Caleb. He hadn't asked her to stay. He hadn't asked her to leave. He had simply stood beside her, giving her something no one else ever had. A choice. Yes, Elena said softly. Victor waited. I have. She stepped forward. My family made arrangements believing they were protecting our future. Victor remained silent. But a future chosen for someone isn't a future they truly live. A shadow crossed Victor's face. You would turn away from your responsibilities? Elena met his gaze steadily. No. She pressed a hand against her chest. I'm choosing which responsibilities belong to me. Victor's eyes shifted toward Caleb. And this man? Caleb stood still. Elena's answer came without hesitation. He reminded me that I deserve to decide who I become. The silence stretched between them. Finally Victor exhaled. Long and slow. I spent years believing duty alone was enough, he admitted. His expression softened with something resembling regret. Perhaps I never asked what you wanted because I assumed I already knew. Elena's eyes glistened. You were trying to do what you thought was right. Victor offered a faint smile. That doesn't always mean we are. For several moments no one spoke. Then Victor removed his hat. I release you from our agreement. Emotion tightened Elena's throat. Thank you. Victor nodded once. I hope you find what you're looking for. His gaze moved briefly toward Caleb. If you hurt her. Caleb interrupted quietly. I won't. Victor studied him carefully. Then, to everyone's surprise, extended his hand. After a pause, Caleb accepted it. No grand speeches followed. No dramatic confrontation. Only understanding. Victor returned to his horse. The other riders mounted behind him. Before turning away, he looked back toward Elena one final time. Be happy. Then they rode into the desert. Their silhouettes growing smaller against the endless horizon until they disappeared entirely. Elena remained standing where she was. The weight she'd carried for years suddenly felt lighter. Beside her, Caleb spoke softly. You all right? Elena laughed through unexpected tears. I think so. She turned toward him. You really would have let me leave. Caleb looked toward the mountains. If that's what you wanted. Elena stepped closer. And if it wasn't? He hesitated. His voice roughened. Then I'd spend the rest of my life being grateful you stayed. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, Elena saw uncertainty in him. Fear. The same fear she'd battled for years. Fear of loss. Fear of choosing wrong. Fear of hoping again. She reached for his hand. You know what I realized? What? Leaving home wasn't the bravest thing I've ever done. Caleb frowned slightly. It wasn't. Elena intertwined their fingers. No. She smiled softly. Choosing to build a new one is. Something shifted behind Caleb's guarded expression. Something long buried. He lifted his free hand and brushed a strand of hair away from Elena's face. I don't know much about second chances, he admitted. Neither do I. Then maybe we'll learn together. Elena leaned forward. Their kiss wasn't desperate. It wasn't fueled by loneliness. It carried patience. Understanding. The quiet certainty of two people who had seen enough hardship to recognize peace when they found it. When they pulled apart, neither rushed to speak. The Arizona wind moved through the juniper branches overhead. Life continued. Simple. Steady. Real. Summer settled over Red Canyon. Days found Elena working alongside Caleb throughout the ranch. She introduced small changes. A vegetable garden behind the house. Bright woven blankets replacing faded ones. Music drifting from the open kitchen windows. Slowly the house stopped feeling like a monument to grief, and became a home once more. Caleb repaired broken shutters. Repainted old fences. Cleared dust from rooms he'd avoided for years. One evening, Elena discovered him standing outside the nursery. The door stood open. Thomas's wooden soldiers remained lined neatly across the shelf. Caleb held one carefully in his hand. You don't have to do this alone, Elena said. He looked toward her. I know. Together they packed away some things. Others remained. Memories didn't disappear. They simply found new places to rest. Months later, Red Canyon hosted its annual harvest gathering. The townsfolk welcomed Elena differently now. Mrs. Watkins greeted her warmly. Children followed Elena through the market square, fascinated by stories of wild mustangs. Even those who'd once whispered offered polite smiles. Change arrived slowly. But it arrived. As the sun began setting, Caleb and Elena rode home beneath streaks of gold and crimson. The ranch appeared in the distance. Smoke curled from the chimney. The juniper tree stood watch near the porch. Home. Caleb guided his horse toward the barn, then paused. I've got something to show you. Curiosity brightened Elena's expression. He led her toward the hill overlooking Red Canyon. At its crest stood a wooden swing suspended beneath another juniper tree. Elena stared. You built this? Caleb shifted awkwardly. Thought it might be nice. Elena laughed softly. You hate swings. I know. Then why build one? Caleb looked out across the desert. For years he'd measured life by what he'd lost. But standing beside Elena, something had changed. He no longer woke wondering how to survive another day. He wondered what tomorrow might bring. His answer came quietly. Because planning for the future doesn't scare me anymore. Elena wrapped her arms around him. The setting sun painted the desert in shades of amber and rose. After a while she asked softly, Do you think Clara would have approved of me? Caleb smiled sadly. I think she'd be grateful someone reminded me how to live again. Tears gathered in Elena's eyes. I wish I could have known her. You would have liked her. And Thomas? Caleb chuckled softly. He would have talked your ears off about horses. Elena laughed. The sound carried into the evening breeze. Light. Unrestrained. Beautiful. Caleb realized then that grief had never truly left him. Perhaps it never would. But love hadn't replaced it. Love had simply made room beside it. The stars emerged overhead one by one. Endless. Bright. Steady. Elena rested her head against Caleb's shoulder. Do you regret helping me? He didn't hesitate. Not for a second. She squeezed his hand. Good. They stood together beneath the Arizona sky. Two people shaped by loss. Changed by choice. United not by obligation or rescue. But by recognition. By respect. By the quiet courage required to trust another person with your heart. Far below, Red Canyon settled into evening. The ranch lights glowed warmly in the distance. And beneath the whispering branches of the juniper tree, Caleb Mercer finally understood something grief had hidden from him for years. Life wasn't asking him to forget the people he'd loved. It was asking him to keep living in a way that honored them. Beside him, Elena smiled toward the horizon. What do you think comes next? Caleb looked toward home. Toward tomorrow. Toward the woman who had arrived like a desert storm and stayed like rain. Then he answered with quiet certainty. Whatever it is. He tightened his hold on her hand. We'll ride into it together. And beneath the vast western sky, they turned toward home. At last, neither of them was riding alone.